the East German exclave inside of West Berlin. This story's got everything. We're going to talk about communists, Nazis, medieval history as well, and also just, I mean, who doesn't enjoy a historic, weird border? Why was there an East German village inside of West Berlin? Let's get into it. So I'm standing now in the grounds of the Schloss Babelsberg, a Gothic-style palace built by the Prussian royal family in the 19th century, one of 3 palaces in the area. And yeah, the history of the place that I want to talk about, though, is the history of the kind of common people right next door to it. And when I say right next door, I mean just, if you can see there's a canal behind me here, just on the other side there, that's where you'll find basically this little village of Klein Glienicke, officially part of Potsdam. Now, Klein Glienicke, small Glienicke, was first mentioned in 1375, and there's a document that mentions it that basically says there's a small settlement here, there's a few farmers. I mean, that's it. There's not like a village tavern, village shop, or anything like that. So it's, I mean, teeny tiny, and quite unlucky when it comes to the 30 Years' War, so 1618, 1648, as the Swedes come down, and the plague comes through, and basically everybody here either leaves or frankly dies, and I mean everybody. This place is then uninhabited for, yeah, quite a good while until it's the Prussian royal family, the Hohenzollern, who start to take an interest in this area in the 19th century, and that's how we get our palaces. So the one I first mentioned, the Schloss Babelsberg, that was built as the summer residence of the really King of Prussia, Wilhelm I, the first Kaiser as well of the German Empire, 1871. And then there is a relative of his, Karl von Preußen, who is seen as quite popular. He's in the army as well. He builds the Schloss Glienicke, and that's in a very Italian style. It's very nice. And then his son has the Jagdschloss, which is built right next to it. When these palaces were built, this was still not considered Berlin. Berlin would grow a lot in the 19th and 20th centuries. Actually, it's at the turn of the 20th century that we get a couple of things. We get the canal that I just mentioned. It's the Teltow Canal. So that's going to allow things to be brought from the Havel River right into the heart of Berlin. That means that this is going to be quite a busy waterway, but it actually ends up cutting off the residents of Klein Glienicke from the bit of land where I'm standing over on this side of this little bridge that you can see down here. The way that they're going to be connected to the rest of Potsdam, though, is just a short walk down the road. There is a bridge, a very famous bridge. I've actually mentioned it in a few of my vertical videos in the past. This is the Glienicke Brücke, or better known as the Bridge of Spies, where Gary Powers was swapped for Rudolf Abel, for example, in 1962, only a year after the Berlin Wall went up. And it's the Berlin Wall, of course, that makes this area so interesting. There's a teeny tiny bridge here. I mean, it's enough for one car to go over at a time. And this used to be very heavily controlled. You would have a little guardhouse here. The people on the other side were, yeah, what can I say? They were checked. Their life was not so fun living over there. And the whole place was then surrounded by the Berlin Wall. And so I thought we would go for a little walk around it, talk about what happened there. What was it like to live there? Talk about a family that escaped, and talk about a fella in there who was killed by the Nazis. Not a particularly good bloke, to be honest with you. So all this to come. Let's go have a look. And so whenever I'm crossing this bridge here and entering Klein Glienicke, I think of who else used to cross this bridge. I mean, the view is very, very nice, of course, especially on a day like this. But yeah, who else did cross this bridge? If we look at the summer of 1945, 3 people in particular, very famous and very important, came over here. And this was Truman, Churchill, and Stalin during the Potsdam Conference. If you'd like to find out more about the Potsdam Conference, I did just release a podcast about it recently. Now, during the conference, this location was chosen over here. Well, there's a palace nearby, another one, Cecilienhof, basically because there's not much around it. It's very secure. Of course, there's a significant fear that some Germans won't think that the war is over and they'll try and attack these leaders. So during the 2 weeks or so of the conference, the Big Three, as they're called, and later, of course, Clement Attlee, they all resided in mansions on the other side here. And there are so many mansions over here in the district of Neubabelsberg because, I mean, we're in a beautiful place by the edge of a city, Western Edge. So that's where you get the fresh air. It's a place where, I mean, when we look at the 1920s, a lot of wealthy people were moving in because there's a big movie studio there, Babelsberg, where Inglourious Bastards was shot, where a lot of the Grand Budapest Hotel was shot as well, right? So, I mean, you know, stuff that's still popular and important today. Thanks, that guy. Anyways, quite a good place to capture some mansions, I suppose. And that's exactly what the Soviets did. In many cases, people were given just a couple of hours to vacate their homes. And then when we look on the other side of the bridge over here, there's a nice beer garden here now. Nice cakes, sausages, ice cream. They didn't pay me to say that. I just like the place. Anyway, the people of this little area, this little village, they would have been turfed out of their homes, at least for a couple of months as well, while the Soviets made sure that no funny business was going to go on during the Potsdam conference. So already from the beginning of the post-war period, it's very, very stressful living here. Now, the Berlin Wall does go up in 1961, ostensibly to stop East Germans leaving the country, although they'll call it the anti-fascist protection barrier. But this place is actually already sealed off, in a sense, with barbed wire in 1952 when the Iron Curtain goes up. Already at that point, it's kind of clear that, what can I say? Life in Klein Glienicke is going to be very unique for East Germans, just on the other side of a tiny bridge like this. And so the first bit of Cold War history really jumps out at you as soon as you cross over the bridge. You take a sharp left and come down to this little area, this secluded area hidden in the trees, which is quite easy to find because we've got a great big bright orange pole here. And these orange poles you can find all the way around where the Berlin Wall used to be. And they tell you that there's a story here. And in this case, we've got 5 people. There is a map over here that shows us exactly where they died. And then we've got all of their stories here, some of which are interlinked, including the 2 on the end here. Let me just double check their names. We've got Rolf Henniger and Horst Körner. Henniger is 28, Körner is 21. They both work for the East German uniformed forces in some way. Körner is a policeman, and as Henniger is driving by in a specially adapted Trabi, one of the old East German cars, he notices that Körner, this man in uniform, is hiding behind a tree. And he thinks that's weird, so they stop the car, they reverse, they start to question him, and Körner is planning to escape. He's a young man. That's the most likely group to escape. And he pulls out a machine pistol, opens fire. Henniger is killed, other security forces return fire, and Körner is killed. And that's it. 2 young men lose their lives right here in a place that is, to be honest, incredibly quiet, secluded, beautiful, and it's not something that you always expect. There is a happier story, though, just around the corner from here, so head down this way and left. We'll go take a look, and that is where the tunnel escape happened here in Klein Glienicke. Okay, so again, this is easy to find because we do have another one of our bright orange poles over here, which does, of course, tell me that, okay, they're not always about death because, yeah, this is a family that escapes, survives, okay? Or I say family, it's actually 2 families. So one of them lived here in Klein Glienicke, and yeah, this is a place where you're going to get checked by the border guards all the time. In fact, if we look at these images over here, you can see on this one, right, border guards by that little bridge that I just told you about. And so, yeah, you drive in and out in your car, you get checked. You have a basement around here, it gets checked. But do you know what? Actually, it floods around here a lot in terms of in the basements, just because Berlin has such a high water table, probably even more so back then before it used to get this hot enough to wear this number. Huh? And so, yeah, they come up with an idea to tunnel out here, and that's because they're at one of the narrowest points of Klein Glienicke. The Berlin Wall is going to be just behind this little Swiss-style chalet over here. Why is there a Swiss chalet here? Because one of the royals liked them and had a lot of them built here. That's why. Anyway, the communists end up destroying a lot of them to build their wall. So what does this family do? They invite their other family friends over from Erfurt, and of course you are allowed to have visitors here. And what they do is they, this family, they also have kids, right? And so they bring in their kids, the family here have their kids, and what they say to the forces is, do you know what? These little kids love it here so much. It's the summer of 1973. Let me check that. Yes, it's the summer of 1973. And it's hot and the kids aren't in school and they love it, so the kids are going to stay here. And of course the security forces seem all right with that. The border guards seem all right with that. And so, very obviously, the guest family, the parents, they leave. They drive out in their car. We've gone, bye-bye, thanks for our stay here. We are definitely not here anymore. And the family that live here smuggle them in the back of their car. You know, if you come and go all the time, you start to get a bit confident, I suppose. You can't get checked all the time. And so, yep, they successfully bring in these other adults, their friends. And by the way, the reason I'm not using their names is I don't know their names. They didn't want their names to be known. And so, yep, I've never been able to find them. Anyways, the other family, then the adults are here, but they can't just like hang out around the place because actually a lot of the people that live here, they are considered very good and true communists. This is because, well, if the East thought that, how can I say, you're possibly a bit of a Western sympathizer, they don't like you so much, they're going to clear you out of an area like this. There are some quite nice houses here, and who are the people that they trust? Yeah, border guards, people who work for the Stasi. Those are the people who they end up giving houses here. So you really cannot trust your neighbors here. I know it's a kind of cliche when we talk about the history of East Germany to talk about neighbors spying on neighbors. It's important to note that it was true, and if you lived around here, yeah, maybe it wasn't so fun when it comes to the neighbors. The Guest family, the Erfurt family, they are here, but they are hiding. They are living in the basement, and they are help digging this tunnel. Now, fortunately, the tunnel did not have to be so long. It ends up being only 19 meters long, but they can't exactly use heavy machinery to dig it. In fact, what they do is they use the blade of a child's shovel. The blade of a child's shovel, not the handle. They've got a little wheelbarrow that they will use to move the earth out into the cellar. So if this cellar gets inspected at any time, these guys are going to get found out. They're going to get in a lot of trouble. Obviously they don't though. The reason that they're able to dig through with the ground being so full of water really is because it's a very dry summer of 1973. So yep, super hot, dry ground. They tunnel through, they shore up the tunnel as well, and then they pop up in West Berlin, but only less than a meter, 80 centimeters. That's like less than a yard away from the Berlin Wall. And yep, they start their new life in West Berlin. So that's why they don't want their name to be known in case other people, family or so, end up getting associated with them and get in trouble. And actually, we don't have to walk so far away from here to find another couple of little gems that give you an idea of what life would have been like in this place. So I'm walking down quaint little path here for a boy who grew up in a village. This feels quite familiar. And if we go backwards and look at the end here, that's where the Berlin Wall was, and that's where one of the palaces was, the Jagdschloss, and that one was, of course, in West Berlin alongside the Schloss Glienicke. But there's another cool little thing that you can find along the way here. You know, we mentioned that place back in 1375, so small and insignificant, it didn't even have a shop. Well, the East Germans at least had a shop. And so here is that little shop, the Konsum, which, yeah, lost those little tiles, didn't it? But still looks quite nice. What was the Konsum? That was basically the village shop in East Germany. The East German supermarkets were the HO, the Handelsorganisation, and the Konsum was basically the smaller version and was, on paper, was a cooperative. So as an East German, you could buy into it and earn dividends and voting rights on how it worked. And that may not have actually worked out in practice. Such was the state of hypocrisy, really, when it comes to the East German government. But yeah, of course, we always look for the fly in the soup when it comes to this history and the history of East Germany. For many people, the Konsum, yeah, it's the place where you picked up your milk and bread and whatever. There's somebody I know, their grandmother used to work there. It was just a kind of like temporary job or a part-time job or so that, you know, allowed her to be a grandmother. And so it's quite cool to walk past that. That's the only one that I've ever seen as well. I'm pointing at it because it's over there. There we go. But yeah, that's the only Konsum sign that I've seen. It's not like I've been to all of East Germany, former East Germany, but quite a lot of it, quite a lot of small villages as well. So that was quite a nice little trip when I saw that. The next thing though that I want to show you, we can see the gates of in the distance here. This is the Jagdschloss, which essentially, this is a neat little trick tour guides play. We show people things that are pretty. Not always the easiest job in Berlin, trust me. Berlin is, you know, the one at the bar with the nice personality. Very interesting place. Not always the most beautiful place, but yeah. The Jagdschloss, I don't have a kind of dramatic story for it, unfortunately, but I thought it would be nice to come and take a look. So if we do the whole tour guide walking backwards trick, I mean, look, we've got this gatehouse set up here and yeah, a bit of 19th century finery, something that the East Germans wouldn't have been happy with. Another shot of how this place looked with the wall up over here as well. This photo exhibition says that it's temporary and it's just for 2019. So aren't we lucky that people in this area care about this stuff and that you can still find it here. There's been a lot of construction around the Jagdschloss in recent years. Recording date here is 2025. And every time I come here, there's a new construction site and more stuff actually looks better as well. So yeah, fingers crossed for a real wonderful transformation of this place, you know? Another really cute little part of Klein Glienicke is the chapel that you can see on the other side of the road. I know tour guides bang on about churches all the time, but yeah, this is from the late 19th century, and the idea is, okay, the royal family, they've got a palace down the road. This is going to be a little place of worship for them, you know? That's the plan anyway. And of course, Cold War history then starts to have its way with it. And actually, this allows me to talk about one of my favorite little stories. The pastor, the preach in charge of this area that covers this Wannsee Island. It covers Sacro over on the way far side of the Glienicke Brook on the other side of the water over there. And yeah, his kind of Gebiet, his area, included places that were both in East and West Berlin. And of course, as a religious man, he found himself in a bit of an odd place in East Germany, a place where, you know, religion had been very much important before and now took a very reduced place in communist society, where the communists were very, very skeptical of religion, going all the way back to Karl Marx describing it as the opiate of the people, right? And so, yeah, there were a few eyes on Pastor Joachim Strauss. He was allowed to use one of his churches, which lay in the death strip between the two walls, for just a little while after the Berlin Wall went up, right the way up to Christmas of 1961. And he's allowed to use this one until the 1970s. But yeah, the authorities were a bit scared of this one. You know, religion, we don't like that. And also, this is very close to the Berlin Wall. And a nosy neighbor around here said they're digging a tunnel out of the basement here. And so this place was run and inspected. They never found evidence of a tunnel, but certainly there were eyes on Strauss. I've read before that he was interrogated in there, that he may have been tortured physically inside of there as well, but I don't want to say that that's a definite fact, okay? That's just kind of the tour guide memory running. When the authorities had this church closed, of course, it starts to fall into disrepair, the roof collapses, trees are growing out of it, and a lot of money has gone into making it look this nice since the Berlin Wall came down, so at some point within the last 3.5 decades or so. We interrupt this broadcast to remind you that if you like this sort of thing, then you should support this kind of thing. How do you do that? Like, comment, subscribe so that more people can see it. That's going to help me be a little bit more successful. And if you really want to help, what would help the most is, for the price of about 1 beer per month, you can sign up to my Patreon. That is really going to help out. Now, there are a few people who have joined already, and thank you guys so much. If you'd like to also be a part of it, get your hands on different scripts, bonus material, then sign up now. All right, let's go back to Klein Glienicke. Okay, so basically being hemmed in by two bridges, right? The little one that I've talked about quite a bit, and then the big one, the Bridge of Spies. That means that people that are coming through here, they come through one tiny little bit, over the little bridge, left, round to the big bridge. Or up to the big main road, and then towards Berlin proper via the district of Wannsee. Makes sense. But it makes me think, okay, you know, most people that come here, and most times I come here, I only see a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit. And so I thought, hey, even a small place like this has got a back road. Let's explore that and go over to the other side of it, the other side of Klein Glienicke. Reason being, that's actually where most people lived. When you read that 500 people used to live here, and you walk through this tiny little bit, you're like, it feels more like 50 than 500, might have been a typo. But nope, the meat of it, if you will, is down this cute little path. And it is quite a cute path because in and amongst the trees here, you've got those Swiss chalet-style houses. I often find Potsdam a little bit strange. You've got an English-style castle, a French one, some that are really showing off. You've got these little Swiss buildings. You've got an Italian-style palace across the road. I mean, yeah, I always feel like the Prussians never really had their own style, and they just kind of keep building all these different things. Very pretty that they used to build. Not so much these days, but yeah. I don't know, just one of those weird little things. Now, when it comes to seeing the meat of it, there's one story that I want to tell over there, which is not a Cold War story, actually, and that's a story of the 30th of June 1934, which was the Night of the Long Knives. You may have heard that name before, and I always think of it like this. This is a Nazi purge of Nazis. So when they first come to power, you have the Reichstag fire, they declare an emergency, the communists have started their revolution, so they say, you should be scared, we'll arrest the communists. They put them into the first of their prisons that they already call concentration camps. It's like, this guy come by, huh? That's just the beginning. The Nazis' goal is to get rid of their political opposition. So, in their first year and a half in power, from January 33 to the 30th of June 34, I think of a needle going through and destroying the left, the Social Democrats, the centrists, conservatives, other nationalist parties. And then, of course, they get themselves into something of a tizzy in the summer of 1934. At this point, the leader of the stormtroopers, Ernst Röhm, he's by far and away one of the most powerful men in the country. It's estimated that there are up to 2.5 million members of the Brown Shirts at this time under his command. And yeah, they really like him. He's seen as this kind of one of the lads, good leader in their eyes. Worth noting that, by the way, when they came to power, there was only 1 million members of the stormtroopers. The thinking, therefore, is that a lot of people joined to, maybe they'd been curious before, and now that the guys are really in power, they'll go for it. But maybe a lot of people, it's something that they'll do to keep a few eyes off of their back. Oh, Mr. Nazi, I'm not a bad guy because I'm a Nazi. I've joined the Brown Shirts. I've got one of these armbands. I go on the marches, right? And then you get the older stormtroopers doing the I liked it before I was cool thing. But anyway, Ernst Röhm, problem. He's talking maybe about taking over the military. And if you're a dictator and you don't have control of your own military, or if your military, because of the Treaty of Versailles, is limited to only 100,000 men, and this guy's got 2.5 million men willing to fight for him, well, competition. And competition in a dictatorship is fine if you're beneath the dictator. Hitler liked that, having people work against each other so that he was on top, but competition towards him, it's a no-go. And so whether or not Röhm was really trying to stage a coup, whether or not he was just mouthing off, complaining about his boss, whether or not he, did want a position in the army under Hitler and he was comfortable there, we'll never know, because what the Nazis decided to do on the night of the Long Knives is go for that last group. Think about that dial I said, starting with the communists, going right the way around. Well, who's the last group that you have to go for? Nazis that aren't Nazi enough, Nazis that are traitors, Nazis that are a problem. And so it is that eventually, in a night of blood, not just in Berlin, actually mostly not in Berlin, it's estimated that between 2,000 and 2,500 of these untrue or problematic Nazis were killed. The Nazis would also, in the weeks coming, change the law retroactively to make sure that nothing that they'd done was actually illegal either. So, why am I talking about this around here? Well, one of the more important figures on the night of the Long Knives lived in Klein Glienicke, and he was killed. I want to go show you where he lived. And so, emerging from that little dark back street over there, crossing the Wannseestrasse, the kind of high street of Klein Glienicke, we enter Griebnitzstrasse, another street with very large buildings and fancy houses. I wonder if I'll get in trouble here again. And down at the end here is number 4. That's where a man named Kurt von Schleicher lived. And even though the Night of the Long Knives was mostly about getting the kind of wrong sort of Nazis, as I said before, Schleicher wasn't a Nazi, but he was a figure that was tricky, slippery. He's often billed as the last chancellor of the Weimar Republic. Certainly he was the last chancellor before Hitler came to power. And Schleicher, he was he liked a bit of a backroom deal. Maybe he was one of the supporters. And you find this in the Weimar era when it comes to military figures like him, people who had been, very important in the Reichswehr, the military after the First World War, and was a bit of a mover and shaker. Knew the people at the top. And it's these kind of people who thought that Adolf Hitler was crass. He wasn't like them. Yes, they liked the military. They liked the Kaiser, the old monarchy. Schleicher was a monarchist. And they thought that what Germany needed was a military dictatorship, It's a bit like a man with a hammer thinks everything is a nail, right? And so, Schleicher then, he had tried to support the Chancellor von Papen. When von Papen didn't work out, he whispers in the ear of the German president of the Weimar period, of the latter half of it, General Paul von Hindenburg, and Papen gets sidelined and Schleicher gets put in power. And he's a guy who likes the idea of ruling by decree. So he's somebody who makes great use of Article 48 of the Weimar Constitution, which will allow the Chancellor unlimited powers in times of emergency and so on. And he can't really hang on to power either, especially as the Nazis start to become more and more popular. In 1932, at one point they're on 37% of the vote, then around 35% or so by the end of the year. And Schleicher, towards the end of January, basically relents and thinks, okay, he can prop up this Adolf Hitler guy, let him make a bit of a fool of himself, and maybe this will all be over, and then the right sort of people like me can be in power, you know? In the first year and a half of the Nazi dictatorship, he knows that there's this burgeoning rift between Ernst Röhm and Adolf Hitler, and so yeah, he tries to exploit that. He's seen on the Night of the Long Knives as a Röhm loyalist. Now Röhm will end up taken into prison and being told to kill himself. He actually in fact ends up being killed by the SS. This is when we see the SS start to be ascendant over the stormtroopers. And Schleicher, yeah, he gets a visit here at his home in Klein Glienicke and ends up dead. There you go. One last thing I wanted to show you around here was, as I said, the kind of meat of the place, which is around the corner. We'll talk a little bit more about life here during the Cold War over there. On our way, following the Wannseestraße here, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about, you know, this place being super desirable in the 20s with the movie stars nearby and people building mansions here and so on. And yeah, I mean, anywhere where there's movie stars, you're going to get the regular old Joe public being interested and want to come and hang out here. And so there did used to be a huge beer garden right down the way as well, called the Burghof. And there are these old postcards you can find of it. You could do boat trips from there. I read that there were more than 100 waiters working there at one point too. Yeah, absolutely wild. But it was the East German secret police who had all that shut down, you know, fun lovers that they are. And where I'm standing right here, so I'm walking up Wannseestraße, and if I turn around, there is a forked road. There are 3 different paths behind me. It's actually this point where, again, if you zoom in on the old Google Maps, you can see that this was the narrowest point during the Cold War. So I've got West Berlin behind me here, and then doing the 180, West Berlin behind me here as well. And the narrowest point here was only 15 meters. I haven't actually read of any escapes taking place right on this location, but I'd imagine it was a very, very tempting place. You have to remember, even though they stocked this place with people who were considered good, true communists, border guards and so on, they are young men, and young men are the most likely people to want to try and escape. And I just thought, hey, why did I mention that young men are the most likely people to try and escape? You might not have connected those little dots in your head. It's actually pretty obvious when you think about it. I always put it like this. As a former young man myself, I can proudly say young men are dumb. Young men have no idea when it comes to danger and so. And so, yeah, you tell a young man 15 meters across here, that's where you can get to freedom and faster and cooler cars and better music. And so a young man's going to look at the death strip, you know, between the 2 Berlin walls with the guard towers and so, and say, yep, that's me. I can do that. And so, yeah, that's why, I mean, if you look at exactly who dies crossing over the wall, it is mostly young men, because young men are just, they're wired that way, not to see the danger. And of course they have less attachments. They're not going to have a house, maybe a job they care about so much, less likely to have kids. So fewer attachments, easier to go, easier to change things. I would say the same in the 1960s as it is in the 2020s. The only difference being we don't have this daft wall dividing 2 Germanys at the moment. I've also come across something just here that I didn't expect to see, which is the ground below me. You've got not a paved road, but these great big concrete slabs instead. This is very, very common for, yeah, wherever the East German security forces would be. So my guess, educated and informed guess, is that this is probably the path that the guards used, especially because it does go right through that little bottleneck, Knotenpunkt, as the Germans would say, where we reach the narrowest point. So this is the path that the border guards were actually allowed to walk on. Remember, border guards are young men, so they're suspect as well. So yeah, I reckon this would have been populated with guard towers, armed guards, sand, barbed wire, tank traps, you name it. And then of course the 2 concrete walls as well. Nowadays, just to do a quick turn around, look at this. Nice houses, gardens, and a place to park your smart car as well. So, around the corner, into the thick of it. The final part, when we look at our map of Klein Glienicke and look at the easternmost part, there's this great big block of houses. I would guess this is where 90% of the 500 or so residents were living. And it looks, you know, just like you'd expect any small East German village to look like today. A couple of older buildings, maybe in need of some TLC, a couple of newer ones, which I would happily take off their hands, you know. I know I always say that. But yeah, This must have been a very claustrophobic place to live. Even if you were a dyed-in-the-wool communist, the Berlin Wall would have been right behind me. The trees at the end there are in West Berlin, but if I turn around, the trees at the end there are in West Berlin. So this is tiny, absolutely tiny. And remember, where the Berlin Wall is, where West Berlin is, there are guards, there are two walls, there is this stretch of space known as the Death Strip. That's also lit 24 hours a day. Now, imagine that, you have neighbors, friends on the other side there. There were houses just on the West Berlin side too. And so that means in the early days, once the wall has gone up, if you're caught, posting messages on your window to your neighbor, waving at them or so on, this is the kind of stuff that could get you in trouble. That's how you would then be deemed untrustworthy and they would move you out of here, take you away. And so they would put in people who they did trust. Like I say, Stasi members, nice house near the lake and so on. Could be nice. And so, yeah, it made for, I have to say, what must have been a very horrible place to live. Now, when we then look at German reunification, well, the year 1990 is quite special. The communist government is gone, pro-reunification government is in power, and there's a law passed that says that people who live in their houses also then have the option to buy them. And, everything's on sale very cheap. I read about people buying their houses around here for 1/100th of the value of similar houses down the road in West Berlin. So this is former East Germany in 1990. When Germany reunified immediately at the end of the year, this law would have to be changed and adapted. Reason being is, East Germany didn't really care about who houses used to belong to. And so you might find that families have been cleared out of here or houses have been seized in the previous dictatorship under the Nazis that may have belonged to Jews. It wouldn't have been so uncommon to find Jews in areas like this, especially with the movie industry nearby. Lots of Jews worked there. And so, having these houses sold off for a pittance really was, in some cases, unjust. And so, you can imagine each case is individual. There's going to be legal wrangling back and forth. This has been our family home for decades. Well, it was our family home before. And of course, with things like that, it's not just legality, money, it's a lot of emotion as well. So really tricky stuff. I hope you've enjoyed a little look around Klein Glienicke, one of the Cold War's more, just one of those little oddities. I don't know, I love stuff like this. It's absolutely mad. You may have been able to tell that I've done this video without a script. Not entirely vibes-based, quite a bit of reading and Googling and so on, but I thought I'd try to see how it is when I'm like totally freewheeling. So I hope that it's been easy to follow. I hope it's been enjoyable as always. Drop a like and a comment and see you next time.